When I changed my Wi-Fi name to HOA President is a crook, I thought the worst that could happen was another bogus $150 fine from Brenda Kowalski. Maybe a threatening letter about my unauthorized wind chimes. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Within an hour, she was pounding on my door, face red with rage, demanding I change it immediately. Within 3 hours, she'd called 911 claiming I was cyberbullying her. Within a week, she was threatening to foreclose on my house over violations that didn't exist. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Normal people don't call the police over Wi-Fi names. They don't threaten to steal your house over garden decorations. Brenda wasn't just power-hungry, she was hiding something big. The acrid smell of my overheating router that morning still reminds me of when I decided to dig into exactly what our HOA queen was so desperate to hide. Little did she know, her overreaction to 3 little words would be the beginning of her downfall. What would you rename your Wi-Fi tomorrow if you knew it could destroy them? Drop your dream network name and your city below. I read every single one. My name is Marcus Chen, and 3 months ago I thought HOA drama was something that happened to other people on Reddit. You know, those insane stories about neighbors measuring fence heights with telescopes and calling code enforcement over dandelions. I was a 34-year-old software engineer who'd just escaped a messy divorce by buying my first house in Saguaro Springs, a supposedly quiet Phoenix subdivision where the biggest drama should have been about Christmas lights staying up too long. The sound of unpacking boxes echoed through my empty 3-bedroom ranch house for weeks. Cardboard dust made me sneeze like I was allergic to my own fresh start, but hey, after sleeping on my buddy's couch for 2 months, even an empty house felt like paradise. Saguaro Springs looked perfect on paper. 847 homes built in the 90s when people still believed HOAs were about maintaining property values, not funding someone's power trip. Mix of young families, retirees, and hardworking folks who actually waved when you drove by. HOA dues were $150 monthly for landscaping, pool maintenance, and neighborhood security, whatever that meant. What I didn't know was that our community was ruled by a woman who literally carried a ruler in her purse to measure grass height. Meet Brenda Kowalski, 58, HOA president for 6 years running, owner of Kowalski Insurance Agency. Picture a woman who irons her jeans and considers fun to be reorganizing her spice rack alphabetically. She drove a white Lexus SUV with, I kid you not, a vanity plate reading HOA. Her lawn was so unnaturally perfect it looked like AstroTurf, and neighbors swore they'd seen her timing sprinkler usage with an actual stopwatch. Week 3 in paradise, I got my welcome gift, a crisp white envelope containing a $75 fine for unauthorized exterior modification. My heinous crime? Wind chimes, on my covered patio, barely visible from Mars, let alone the street. The violation notice was typed on official letterhead like she was the Secretary of Defense, complete with Brenda's looping signature and a paragraph about maintaining community standards and property values. She'd added a handwritten note in purple ink. Welcome to the neighborhood. We expect all residents to respect our rules. I took down the wind chimes and paid the fine. $75 seemed easier than declaring war on HOA Hitler during my first month. Spoiler alert, appeasing bullies never works. Month 2, $100 fine for my garbage can being visible from the street. I'd wheeled it out 30 minutes early before work. 30 minutes. The citation included a time-stamped photo taken at 6:47 a.m. because apparently Brenda was patrolling the neighborhood like some suburban sheriff before most people had their coffee. Month 3 brought a warning letter about excessive noise disturbance. My crime against humanity? Playing acoustic guitar in my living room at 2 p.m. on a Saturday, through closed windows. The horror. Around this time, I noticed something weird about our neighborhood bulletin boards. Every single one featured the same glamour shot of Brenda in a navy business suit, standing next to a sign reading, "Your HOA team works for you." Funny thing, I'd never seen this mysterious team. Just Brenda. Always Brenda. But the moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon when I saw Mrs. Rodriguez crying in her front yard. This sweet 72-year-old grandmother was clutching another violation notice, her weathered hands shaking like autumn leaves. $200 for dead plant material. The dead plant material in question? A brown spot the size of a quarter on an otherwise gorgeous rosebush. Mrs. Rodriguez was on Social Security. She'd been asking neighbors if she should tear out her entire garden rather than face more fines. The texture of her papery skin and the way her voice cracked when she said, "I just don't understand what I did wrong," made something snap inside me. That night, I dove into online HOA forums and public records. What I found was a pattern. Brenda issued 40% more fines than previous presidents. Meeting attendance had plummeted 60% in 3 years because people were terrified to speak up. This wasn't about community standards. This was about a power-drunk insurance agent treating our neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. Time to change my Wi-Fi name. 3 days after Mrs. Rodriguez's garden crisis, I decided enough was enough. Tuesday morning, I grabbed my laptop, pulled up my router settings, and changed my Wi-Fi network name from the boring Chen Home to something with a little more personality. HOA President is a crook. Within 2 hours, my doorbell was ringing like someone's house was on fire. Brenda stood on my porch wearing what I can only describe as her battle outfit, a pressed pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, holding a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. The smell of her overpowering floral perfume hit me before she even opened her mouth, like walking into a Bath and Body Works during a clearance sale. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of fake politeness that makes your teeth hurt, "we need to discuss your inappropriate Wi-Fi network name immediately." "Inappropriate how?" I asked, genuinely curious. "It's visible only to people in range. Last I checked, we still had freedom of speech in America." Her left eye started twitching like a broken turn signal. "You are defaming my character and creating a hostile environment for community members. I demand you change it within 24 hours or face serious consequences." That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of backing down like I had with the wind chimes, I smiled and said, "Actually, Brenda, I think I'll keep it exactly as it is." The color drained from her face, then rushed back like a crimson tide. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, then stormed off my porch muttering something about disrespectful millennials and legal action. Here's where things got interesting. Instead of just complaining, I decided to do what any good software engineer would do: gather data. I started documenting every interaction, every fine, every violation notice in the neighborhood. I created a spreadsheet. Yes, I know how exciting that sounds, but stay with me, tracking enforcement patterns across Saguaro Springs. What I found was absolutely mind-blowing. Brenda's friends and business associates never got fined, ever. Her next-door neighbor had a boat parked in his driveway for 3 weeks, clear covenant violation, without a single notice. But Mrs. Martinez got dinged $125 for a garden hose that was visible from her backyard. The most telling discovery? Brenda's son Danny ran a landscaping business, and his commercial truck with Kowalski Landscaping emblazoned on the side sat in her driveway every Tuesday and Thursday night. Same exact covenant violation that cost me $150 when a plumber's van was in my driveway for 6 hours fixing a kitchen leak. I remembered something from my research into HOA law when I first bought the house. Arizona requires enforcement to be consistent and uniform. Selective enforcement can invalidate fines and even trigger discrimination lawsuits. I made a mental note to keep documenting everything because these patterns were becoming my ace in the hole. By Thursday, my Wi-Fi rebellion had inspired others. 3 neighbors changed their network names to show solidarity. Ask Brenda about double standards, HOA transparency now, and my personal favorite, where is our money going? The digital revolution was spreading faster than gossip at a church picnic. Brenda's response was swift and nuclear. Friday afternoon, she called an emergency HOA board meeting to address what she termed a coordinated harassment campaign against community leadership. The meeting notice, delivered to every door, claimed my Wi-Fi name constituted defamation, cyberbullying, and conduct detrimental to community welfare. She demanded a $500 fine for bringing disrepute to the Saguaro Springs community. $500 for a Wi-Fi name. The meeting was scheduled for Sunday evening at the community center. Normally these things attracted maybe 8 people, the board members and whoever was unlucky enough to have current violations. This time was different. 43 residents showed up. 43. The most in the community's recorded history. And let me tell you, people were pissed. Janet Morrison, our treasurer, looked like she'd rather be getting a root canal than sitting at that folding table. The other board members kept glancing at each other like they were wondering how they'd ended up in this mess. But Brenda was in her element, wielding a gavel like Thor's hammer and calling for order every 30 seconds. The sound of that gavel echoing off the community center walls still gives me chills. "We're here to address the unacceptable harassment of your elected officials," she announced, gesturing toward a printout of my Wi-Fi settings like it was evidence in a murder trial. That's when something beautiful happened. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up. This tiny, soft-spoken grandmother who'd been terrorized over a quarter-sized brown spot on her roses, and in a voice that carried across the entire room said, "Brenda, maybe if you weren't such a crook, people wouldn't call you one." The room erupted. People started sharing their own stories of selective enforcement, bogus fines, and harassment. Vietnam veteran Tom Bradley talked about getting fined for his American flag being 3 inches too wide. Single mom Sarah Williams described a $300 citation for sidewalk chalk art that her 5-year-old had drawn. Within 20 minutes, Brenda had completely lost control of her own meeting. She kept banging that gavel and shouting about hostile environments and personal attacks, but nobody was listening anymore. Finally, she grabbed her papers, declared the meeting indefinitely postponed due to intimidation, and stormed out of the community center. But here's the twist that should have been my second red flag. As she was leaving, I heard her mutter to Janet Morrison, "They have no idea what they're messing with." Brenda's cryptic threat about us not knowing what we were messing with became crystal clear the following Tuesday when I returned from a weekend camping trip to find my driveway empty. My car was gone. Not stolen. Towed. I stood there in my driveway at 8 p.m., duffel bag in hand, staring at the oil stain where my Honda had been parked for 2 days. A bright orange violation notice was taped to my garage door, flapping in the evening breeze like a surrender flag. Emergency vehicle removal. Improperly registered vehicle removed per HOA authority. Contact Randy's Towing for release. $380 retrieval fee plus $45 per day storage. My crime? Having a temporary registration in my windshield. The permanent plates had been delayed at the DMV, a story older than time itself. The temporary registration was completely legal and clearly visible, but apparently not good enough for Brenda's suddenly eagle-eyed enforcement standards. Randy's Towing was closed on Sunday, of course. I spent the night researching Arizona towing laws on my laptop, the blue screen glow making my empty garage feel even more depressing. What I discovered made my blood pressure spike. Turns out, I'd been curious about HOA towing authority when I first moved in, one of those boring legal rabbit holes you fall into when buying your first house. Arizona law requires HOAs to follow strict procedures for emergency towing, including written notice and a 24-hour waiting period unless there's immediate safety risk. A car parked legally in its own driveway hardly qualified as a safety emergency. Monday morning, I drove my rental car to Randy's Towing, located in a part of Phoenix where the gravel crunched under your feet and everything smelled faintly of diesel fuel and broken dreams. The office was a converted trailer with bars on the windows and a hand-painted sign that had seen better decades. Randy himself was a mountain of a man wearing coveralls with Kowalski embroidered on the chest. Kowalski. As in Brenda Kowalski. "You Marcus Chen?" he grunted, not looking up from his newspaper. "That'll be $425 total, cash or certified check." "Before I pay," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "can you show me the emergency authorization for the tow?" Randy finally looked up, his expression shifting from bored to annoyed. "Lady called it in. Said it was abandoned vehicle." "What lady?" "HOA president. My sister handles the contracts." Sister. Not sister-in-law like I'd assumed from the name. Actual family. Which meant Brenda had a direct financial interest in every car Randy's company towed from our neighborhood. I paid the ransom and drove home, my mind racing. That evening, I started digging deeper into the HOA's vendor relationships. What I found was a pattern that made my spreadsheet-loving heart sing with righteous indignation. Randy's Towing had been awarded an exclusive contract 3 years ago, coinciding exactly with Brenda's re-election as HOA president. Their rates were 30% higher than the previous company. More interesting, towing incidents had increased by 340% since they took over. Either our neighborhood had suddenly become a hotbed of parking violations, or something else was going on. This called for some old-fashioned detective work. I started canvassing the neighborhood, talking to anyone who'd been towed in the past year. The stories were infuriating. Elderly Mr. Patterson got towed for parking incorrectly in his own driveway. Apparently his SUV was 6 inches too close to the sidewalk. Young couple with a newborn had their car towed while the wife was in labor because they'd parked in a visitor spot overnight. But here's where Brenda made her first real mistake. I decided to organize a petition to review her emergency towing authority. Arizona law requires only 25% of homeowners to sign a petition forcing a special election. In a community of 847 homes, that meant 212 signatures. I figured it would take weeks to gather that many names. I was wrong. Going door to door revealed a neighborhood seething with resentment. People weren't just angry about towing, they were furious about everything. Mrs. Chen, no relation, had been fined for her American flag being 12 inches too wide. Single mother Ashley Rodriguez was charged $300 for a baby stroller left on her front porch. Young couple Brad and Jennifer Walsh faced a potential lien for keeping their garbage cans in their garage instead of a designated storage area that didn't exist. The smell of fresh-cut grass and simmering anger seemed to hang over every conversation. Within 5 days, I had 150 signatures. People weren't just signing, they were begging to help. Retired teacher Linda Morrison offered to make copies. Marine veteran Steve Bradley volunteered to canvass the streets I hadn't reached yet. But Brenda wasn't going down without a fight. Word of the petition somehow reached her within hours of my starting it. Suddenly, her own counter-petition appeared, asking residents to stop the harassment of volunteer board members who sacrifice their time for community improvement. Her version painted me as a disgruntled, divorced man targeting successful women in leadership positions. She organized coffee meetings where she warned neighbors that outside agitators were trying to destroy property values through chaos and litigation. The neighborhood was splitting into camps, Team Marcus versus Team Brenda, with battle lines drawn over perfectly manicured lawns and precisely measured fence heights. Then something happened that changed everything. An unmarked manila envelope appeared in my mailbox containing photocopied invoices showing the HOA paying Brenda's insurance company for property management consulting services. Services that appeared identical to what we already paid our actual property management firm to do. The anonymous note attached was written in shaky handwriting. Check the books. She's been double billing for 3 years. The anonymous tip about double billing sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days like a radioactive sandwich. Part of me wondered if this was some elaborate trap, Brenda trying to bait me into making accusations I couldn't prove. But those invoices looked real enough to frame. I was still debating my next move when Brenda made it for me. Thursday evening, I was grilling burgers on my back patio, the same patio where my unauthorized wind chimes used to create their reign of terror, when 2 Phoenix police cruisers pulled into my driveway. The smell of charcoal and barbecue sauce suddenly seemed a lot less appetizing, and a lot more like evidence of my apparently criminal lifestyle. Officer Rodriguez knocked on my front door while his partner stood by the cars, hand resting casually on his radio like he expected me to make a run for it. Mr. Chen, we received a complaint about harassment and threatening behavior. Mind if we ask you a few questions? Before I could even process what was happening, Brenda materialized from across the street like a suburban vampire emerging at dusk. She'd clearly been watching through her blinds with the dedication of a Cold War spy. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly," she gushed, clutching a manila folder against her chest like it contained state secrets. "This man has been stalking me, defaming my character online, and now I have reason to believe he's made terrorist threats." I nearly choked on my own saliva. Terrorist threats? What terrorist threats? "Your Wi-Fi name is clearly intended to intimidate and terrorize me. You've been photographing my property, tracking my daily movements, and yesterday you made threatening gestures when I drove past." The threatening gesture in question? I'd waved, like a human being with basic social skills. Officer Rodriguez looked like he'd rather be arresting actual criminals. The texture of his leather notebook creaking as he flipped it open was probably the most serious thing about this entire situation. "Ma'am, what exactly did this Wi-Fi name say?" "HOA president is a crook. It's visible to the entire neighborhood. It's cyberbullying and constitutes threats against a public official." I watched Officer Rodriguez's mouth twitch slightly. He was clearly fighting the urge to ask if she was serious. "Sir," he said to me, "have you made any direct threats against Ms. Kowalski?" "Officer, The only interaction I've had with Ms. Kowalski was when she pounded on my door demanding I change my internet settings, unless aggressive Wi-Fi naming is now a federal crime. That's when I made a decision that probably saved my entire case. Instead of getting defensive like most people would, I pulled out my phone and showed Officer Rodriguez my documentation, photos of selective enforcement, the spreadsheet tracking fine patterns, screenshots showing identical violations with wildly different outcomes based on the violator's relationship to Brenda. This is actually part of a larger investigation I've been conducting, I explained calmly. I believe there may be significant financial irregularities in our HOA management. Officer Rodriguez scrolled through the photos, his eyebrows climbing steadily higher. His partner leaned over to look, and I could see them exchange the kind of glance cops share when they realize they're dealing with something way more interesting than a noise complaint. Mr. Chen, Officer Rodriguez said quietly, have you considered filing a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate? They handle HOA financial oversight and fraud investigations. The moment he said fraud investigations, Brenda's face drained of color faster than a bathtub with the plug pulled. She started talking in rapid-fire bursts, her voice climbing octaves like a soprano hitting panic notes. This is exactly what I mean, officers. He's making wild accusations, spreading vicious rumors, trying to destroy my reputation and the stability of our entire community. Ma'am, the second officer said with the patience of someone who dealt with actual emergencies, changing a Wi-Fi name isn't illegal. And from what I can see, Mr. Chen has documented some legitimate concerns about inconsistent rule enforcement. Then, Officer Rodriguez said something that made the evening air feel suddenly electric. We've actually been seeing a lot of HOA embezzlement cases lately. Seems like every month there's another investigation. State's been cracking down pretty hard on financial misconduct in community associations. The word embezzlement hit the conversation like a grenade in a library. Brenda's hands started trembling like autumn leaves in a windstorm. This is absolutely ridiculous. I've served this community faithfully for 6 years. I don't have to stand here and listen to these baseless, malicious accusations. But here's the beautiful irony. Nobody had accused her of anything yet. Officer Rodriguez had just mentioned that embezzlement investigations were trending. Her meltdown was like someone screaming, "I didn't do it," when nobody had asked the question. After the officers left, I made 2 calls that would change everything. First to the ADRI complaint hotline, then to my college buddy Jake, who worked in forensic accounting. "Marcus," Jake said after I laid out the situation, "systematic double billing isn't just HOA misconduct. That's wire fraud territory. Federal prosecutors love cases like this." Federal territory. Suddenly my Wi-Fi rebellion had wandered into a whole different league. The next morning brought my formal complaint to the Arizona Department of Real Estate, complete with anonymous invoices and documentation that would make a CPA weep with joy. What I didn't realize was that my complaint would trigger an automatic records preservation order. Brenda could no longer claim documents were unavailable or conveniently under review. The mousetrap was baited and set. Now I just had to wait for the cheese to work its magic. 3 days after filing my complaint, everything changed. I was working from home Tuesday morning, debugging code and wondering if Brenda had invented any new violations while I wasn't looking, when an unmarked sedan pulled into the HOA office parking lot. A woman in a no-nonsense business suit got out, carrying an official briefcase and wearing the kind of expression that suggested someone's day was about to go spectacularly sideways. 20 minutes later, she was knocking on my door. "Mr. Chen, I'm Sandra Williams, ADRI financial investigator. Your complaint triggered what we call an immediate intervention. We need to talk." She spread documents across my kitchen table like a dealer shuffling cards, except these cards could send people to prison. The smell of fresh paper and toner ink filled my kitchen, the scent of justice being served with a side of federal charges. "What we found in our initial review," Sandra said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd just solved a puzzle, "makes your Wi-Fi name look like prophetic genius. The first bombshell, 3 bank accounts. 3. The HOA was supposed to have 1 operating account that the board could monitor. Instead, Brenda had created a financial shell game that would make a Vegas con artist proud. Account 1 was the official HOA account, the one Janet Morrison occasionally glimpsed statements for. It contained just enough money to pay basic bills and keep up appearances. Account 2, labeled Special Projects Reserve, was where things got interesting. $47,000 had been siphoned there over 18 months for landscaping improvements and legal reserves. Actual landscaping receipts? $8,200. The remaining $38,800 had been paid to Kowalski Property Services, a company that existed only on paper and in Brenda's bank account. Account 3 was the masterpiece. A completely hidden emergency maintenance fund containing $23,000 that had been systematically drained through payments to Randy's Towing for security consultation services. I sat there doing mental math while Sandra watched my expression change from confusion to disbelief to pure fury. This wasn't just theft. This was an elaborate, multi-year criminal enterprise disguised as community service. Kowalski Property Services, Sandra continued, clearly enjoying the revelation, is registered to Brenda's home address. The services listed, community relations, administrative oversight, resident liaison, are identical to what you already pay your legitimate property management company to do. So Brenda was literally paying herself to do work that was already being done. The audacity was breathtaking. But the insurance scam was the cherry on top of this corruption sundae. Saguaro Springs had been paying Kowalski Insurance $890 monthly for comprehensive liability management. Standard HOA insurance in our area cost $240. She'd been pocketing $650 every month for 3 years, another $23,400 in pure profit. Then there were the towing kickbacks. Randy's company charged premium rates for every removal, with Brenda authorizing tows that would make a reasonable person laugh. Every bogus violation generated revenue that flowed straight back to the family business. My calculator confirmed what my gut already knew. $85,000 in direct embezzlement, plus $67,000 in inflated contracts and kickbacks. Over $150,000 stolen from 847 families who just wanted decent neighborhood management. Under Arizona law, Sandra explained, HOA funds are considered community trust property. What Ms. Kowalski did isn't just theft. It's felony embezzlement with federal implications once you exceed $50,000. She gathered her papers with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. All accounts are frozen as of 1 hour ago. This case is going to the Attorney General's office for criminal prosecution, and the FBI will likely join the party due to interstate banking violations. As Sandra's car disappeared down our street, I realized something incredible had happened. My stupid Wi-Fi name had exposed a criminal operation that had been robbing our entire community for years. I couldn't wait to see Brenda's face when she tried to access those accounts. The sound of justice approaching was going to be absolutely beautiful. By Thursday evening, word had leaked through the neighborhood faster than news of a Costco free sample day. Sandra Williams might have been discreet, but frozen bank accounts have a way of announcing themselves when the landscaping crew suddenly can't get paid. I organized an emergency community meeting for Friday night, expecting maybe 30 concerned homeowners. What I got was 340 residents crammed into our rec center like sardines at an anxiety convention, with an overflow crowd pressed against windows like they were watching the Super Bowl. The air inside was thick with nervous energy and the smell of industrial coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through disappointment. People weren't just angry, they were furious in that special way reserved for betrayal by someone you trusted with your mortgage payment. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up first, her voice trembling but fierce. Marcus, what you discovered? I've been eating dollar store ramen to pay Brenda's fines. At 72 years old, I'm choosing between medication and wind chime violations. The room went silent except for the sound of 340 people simultaneously clenching their jaws. Then Tom Bradley, our Vietnam vet, rose to his feet. I want that woman in handcuffs, prison stripes, the whole damn thing. She stole from every family in this room. That's when I knew we needed to weaponize our anger professionally. Sandra Williams attended as an observer, but she'd brought reinforcements. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in HOA litigation and had apparently been watching our drama unfold like it was premium cable. What we're dealing with, Jennifer explained to the packed room, isn't just simple theft. Under Arizona's Racketeering Act, systematic community embezzlement qualifies for RICO charges. She paused for effect, clearly enjoying the anticipation. That means treble damages, 3 times whatever she stole, plus all legal fees. If we prove $150,000 in theft, we could recover $450,000. Enough to build that playground everyone's wanted and maybe install security cameras to watch for the next Brenda. The math hit the room like lightning hitting a golf course. Suddenly, everyone was doing calculations in their heads and liking what they saw. Jennifer offered to handle our case pro bono, knowing criminal restitution would cover her fees. More importantly, she outlined a legal strategy that would hit Brenda from 3 directions simultaneously: criminal prosecution, civil recovery, and governance reform that would prevent future HOA dictators. But we needed organization, and this crowd was ready to form committees like it was a suburban revolution. Janet Morrison finally found her courage and volunteered to lead the evidence team. After years of being terrified to speak up, Brenda employed her at the insurance agency after all. Janet was ready to spill everything about the blank checks she'd been pressured to sign and the financial reports that were deliberately designed to confuse rather than inform. Steve Bradley organized document recovery with military precision. His dining room table soon looked like FBI headquarters, covered with violation notices, fine receipts, and threatening letters arranged in chronological order. The paper trail was so extensive we joked about needing a warehouse. Linda Morrison became our communications coordinator, creating phone trees and private Facebook groups with the efficiency of someone who'd organized decades of school fundraisers. Within hours, we had secure channels for coordinating strategy and sharing evidence. But the real bombshell came Saturday morning when someone knocked on my door at 7 a.m. Danny Kowalski stood on my porch looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Brenda's own son, the landscaping contractor who'd been part of the financial scheme, wanted to confess. "Mr. Chen," he said, his voice barely audible, "I can't sleep anymore. What my mom made me do, the fake invoices, the inflated bills, I have receipts showing what we actually charged versus what the HOA paid." Apparently, Brenda had been pressuring Danny to submit fraudulent invoices for months. When he resisted, she threatened to destroy his business reputation and make sure he never got another contract in Phoenix. Family loyalty only goes so far when your mother is running a criminal enterprise. Danny's evidence was devastating. Real receipts showing $8,200 in actual landscaping costs versus $47,000 in HOA payments. His testimony would be the final nail in Brenda's legal coffin. The momentum was building like a desert thunderstorm, but we needed one final element: public pressure. Jennifer suggested media coordination to ensure maximum impact when charges were filed. Channel 12 investigative reporter Amanda Martinez had been tracking HOA corruption across Arizona like a bloodhound. When she heard about our case, her response was immediate. This could be the story that breaks open suburban financial crime statewide. We coordinated everything for the next monthly HOA meeting. Amanda would be there with cameras, Sandra would have law enforcement on standby, and 400-plus homeowners would finally confront the woman who'd been systematically robbing them while lecturing them about community standards. The pieces were in place, the evidence was overwhelming, and justice was about to be served with a generous helping of public humiliation. Brenda's empire was about to crumble in front of the entire neighborhood she'd terrorized, and I couldn't wait to watch. The weekend before our planned confrontation, Brenda discovered the scope of the investigation through what I can only assume was divine intervention or really bad luck, depending on your perspective. Monday morning, she showed up at the bank to make her usual monthly transfer from the special projects account to her personal Kowalski Property Services account. The teller's face when she tried to access the frozen funds must have been priceless. Within an hour, Brenda was on the phone with every board member, her voice reaching octaves that probably disturbed neighborhood dogs. "There's been a terrible mistake," she told Janet Morrison, who immediately called to warn me. "Some vindictive individual has filed false complaints with state regulators. We need an emergency board meeting to address this malicious attack on our community leadership." But here's where Brenda made her first catastrophic error. Instead of laying low and consulting a lawyer, she went into full attack mode. Tuesday morning brought a campaign of character assassination that would have impressed a political operative. Brenda hired Morrison Crisis Management. Yes, that's a real company in Phoenix that specializes in reputation repair for embattled executives. The irony of someone accused of embezzling HOA funds spending more money on crisis management wasn't lost on any of us. She flooded the neighborhood with glossy flyers featuring her professional headshots and testimonials from satisfied homeowners praising her dedicated service to community excellence. The flyers appeared on every doorstep like suburban propaganda, printed on cardstock that probably cost more than most families spent on groceries. The narrative she pushed was masterfully crafted and completely predictable. Marcus Chen was a disgruntled divorced man targeting successful women in positions of authority. I was painted as someone who couldn't handle strong female leadership and was using fabricated financial complaints to settle personal scores. Her crisis management team even created a website, Brenda Kowalski Truth.com, featuring carefully selected testimonials and a timeline of my harassment campaign that started with my aggressive Wi-Fi name. The smell of desperation was so thick you could practically taste it. But Brenda wasn't content with just a public relations offensive. She escalated to what I can only describe as suburban psychological warfare. Wednesday night, someone, and I'm not saying who, but let's call them concerned community members, started leaving anonymous voicemails on my phone. The voice was obviously disguised, probably using one of those voice changer apps, threatening serious consequences if I didn't stop destroying our neighborhood's reputation. Thursday morning, I found my car windshield cracked in the HOA parking lot. No note, no witnesses, just a spiderweb of damage that would cost $400 to repair. When I called the police, they said without witnesses or security cameras, there wasn't much they could do. But they did increase patrol frequency in our area. The anonymous harassment escalated Friday when someone slipped letters under several doors claiming I was planning to sue every homeowner individually and targeting families with children because of his bitter divorce. The letters were printed on generic paper, but the writing style screamed Brenda's particular brand of passive-aggressive eloquence. Here's what she didn't know. I'd been documenting everything. Every flyer, every voicemail, every threatening letter went straight into evidence bags that Steve Bradley helped me organize with military precision. Janet Morrison even provided samples of Brenda's writing style from previous HOA communications for handwriting comparison. But the most damaging revelation came from an unexpected source, Brenda's own desperation. Private investigator Rick Santos contacted me Friday afternoon with information that made my head spin. Someone had hired him to conduct background research on Marcus Chen, specifically looking for character flaws, financial problems, or legal troubles that might discredit his accusations. Rick had a policy of not working cases that smelled like witness intimidation, especially when the person being investigated was clearly the victim rather than the perpetrator. He'd kept copies of everything, including the cashier's check used to pay his retainer, a check that came from something called Kowalski Community Consulting, another shell company. Even under federal investigation, Brenda was creating new financial vehicles to fund her defense. Rick's files revealed the scope of Brenda's counter-investigation. She'd contacted my ex-wife, my former employer, even my college roommates. She was building a character assassination dossier that would have impressed the FBI, but her biggest mistake was approaching Mrs. Rodriguez. Our sweet 72-year-old neighbor called me Saturday morning, her voice shaking with rage rather than fear for the first time since I'd known her. "Marcus, that woman came to my door yesterday asking about your drinking habits and whether you'd ever been aggressive toward women. She offered me $500 to sign a statement saying you made me feel unsafe." $500. To an elderly woman on a fixed income. For a false statement that would undermine the entire investigation. That's when I knew Brenda had crossed a line that would destroy whatever sympathy she might have had left in the community. Bribing elderly victims wasn't just morally bankrupt, it was felony witness tampering. I called Jennifer Walsh immediately. She listened to Mrs. Rodriguez's story with the satisfaction of someone who'd just been handed the perfect closing argument. "Marcus," she said, "what Brenda just did isn't just unethical. Attempting to coerce false testimony from a victim is a federal crime. She's building our case for us." Monday's HOA meeting was going to be more than just a confrontation. It was going to be a public downfall of epic proportions. Brenda had no idea that her desperate attempts to save herself were actually sealing her fate. Sunday afternoon, 24 hours before the scheduled HOA meeting, Brenda played her final card. And it was exactly the kind of desperate move that proves someone knows they're caught. She filed an emergency restraining order against me. The petition, filed with Maricopa County Superior Court, claimed I had been stalking, harassing, and threatening her for months. She alleged that my Wi-Fi name constituted cyberbullying with intent to cause emotional distress, that my petition drive was coordinated intimidation, and that my documentation efforts represented obsessive surveillance behavior indicating potential for violence. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Monday at 2 p.m., exactly 4 hours before our community meeting. Pure tactical timing designed to prevent my attendance and disrupt our coordinated confrontation. Jennifer Walsh called me Sunday night with a mixture of outrage and professional satisfaction. "Marcus, this is the most frivolous restraining order petition I've seen in 15 years of practice, but it's also the stupidest legal move Brenda could have made." Monday morning, I sat in a sterile courthouse waiting room that smelled like industrial disinfectant and nervous sweat, watching Brenda pace the hallway with her newly hired attorney, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. When we finally entered Judge Martinez's courtroom, Brenda presented her case with the theatrical flair of someone auditioning for a soap opera. She claimed my Wi-Fi name made her fear for her safety in her own neighborhood. She waved printouts of my documentation like they were evidence of criminal stalking. She even brought up my divorce, suggesting it indicated a pattern of hostility toward women. Judge Martinez listened with the patience of someone who'd heard every ridiculous petition imaginable, occasionally glancing at the evidence pile with barely concealed skepticism. Then it was my turn. Jennifer had prepared a defense that was part legal argument, part documentary evidence, and part masterclass in how to destroy someone's credibility without raising your voice. She presented my complete documentation chronologically, starting with the wind chime fine and progressing through every violation, every selective enforcement example, every piece of evidence that led to the financial investigation. Then came the ADRI findings, the frozen bank accounts, and the criminal referrals. "Your Honor," Jennifer said, spreading Sandra Williams' investigation documents across the table, "Mr. Chen isn't stalking Ms. Kowalski. He's exposed systematic embezzlement of over $150,000 from 847 families. This restraining order petition is an attempt to silence the whistleblower in an ongoing criminal investigation." Judge Martinez's expression shifted from skeptical to actively annoyed. He reviewed the ADRE documents, looked at the evidence of selective enforcement, then fixed Brenda with a stare that could have melted steel. "Ms. Kowalski, nothing in this petition suggests Mr. Chen has threatened you with violence or engaged in behavior that would justify court intervention. Changing a Wi-Fi name, organizing community petitions, and cooperating with state investigators are all protected activities." Brenda's attorney started to object, but Judge Martinez cut him off. "Furthermore, filing false restraining orders to interfere with legitimate investigations is itself sanctionable behavior. This petition is denied, and I'm ordering Ms. Kowalski to pay Mr. Chen's attorney fees for having to defend against this frivolous action." The gavel came down like a thunderclap. Brenda's face went through approximately 17 different shades of red before settling on a color I'd never seen on a human being. But the real fireworks started in the courthouse parking lot. Channel 12's Amanda Martinez had been monitoring the court calendar. Apparently, frivolous restraining orders and high-profile embezzlement cases make for compelling television. She was waiting with cameras when we emerged from the building. "Ms. Kowalski, how do you respond to allegations that you've embezzled over $150,000 from your HOA?" Brenda's response was everything we could have hoped for, and more. Instead of no comment or walking away, she launched into a screaming tirade about media persecution, false accusations, and vindictive residents destroying community harmony. The entire meltdown was captured in high-definition glory, complete with wild hand gestures and the kind of facial expressions that make perfect screenshot material for social media. "This is all his fault!" she shrieked, pointing at me like I was personally responsible for global warming. "He's a bitter, divorced man who can't stand successful women in leadership positions." Amanda Martinez, professional that she was, maintained perfect composure while Brenda provided enough sound bites to fill an entire news segment. The contrast between Amanda's calm questions and Brenda's unhinged responses was journalistic gold. The interview ended when Brenda's attorney physically pulled her away from the cameras, but the damage was done. Her public meltdown would be the lead story on Monday Evening News, complete with dramatic courthouse footage and expert commentary about HOA corruption. By 4 p.m., video clips were already circulating on social media. Had HOA Karen was trending locally by 5 p.m. As I drove to the community center for our 6 p.m. meeting, I realized something profound had happened. Brenda had managed to completely destroy whatever remaining credibility she might have had before the most important meeting in our neighborhood's history. She'd handed us the perfect opening act for her own downfall. The main event was about to begin, and thanks to her courthouse meltdown, the entire city would be watching. By 5:30 p.m., the community center parking lot looked like a tailgate party for justice. Cars filled every space, spilled onto the street, and wrapped around 2 full blocks. People I'd never seen before were walking toward the building carrying folding chairs and wearing expressions that suggested they'd cleared their calendars for the main event. The news vans arrived at 5:45. Not just Channel 12, but 3 other stations that had picked up Amanda Martinez's courthouse footage. The HO Karen hashtag had gone viral across Phoenix, and apparently everyone wanted to witness the downfall of suburban tyranny in real time. Inside the community center, 480 people had crammed themselves into a space designed for 300. The overflow crowd pressed against windows like they were watching a championship fight. The air was thick with anticipation, and the smell of nervous energy mixed with industrial coffee that someone had optimistically brewed by the gallon. At exactly 6 p.m., Brenda arrived. She'd clearly spent the afternoon in crisis mode. Fresh makeup, a power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and the kind of rigid posture that screamed, "I'm going down swinging." Her new attorney flanked her like a bodyguard, carrying a briefcase that suggested he'd billed enough hours in 4 hours to buy a small car. The crowd fell silent as she walked to the front table. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet. I'd been elected to speak first, representing the 400-plus homeowners who'd signed our formal complaint. Standing up in front of that packed room with cameras rolling and the weight of an entire community's trust on my shoulders was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. 3 months ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, I changed my Wi-Fi name to HOA President is a Crook. I thought I was just being petty. Turns out, I was being prophetic. The crowd's nervous laughter broke the tension like a dam bursting. I laid out the timeline methodically. The harassment campaign, the selective enforcement, the investigation that uncovered systematic theft. Every detail was documented. Every accusation was supported by evidence. Every dollar was accounted for. Then Sandra Williams stepped forward to present the ADRE findings officially. The numbers hit the room like physical blows. $85,000 in direct embezzlement, $67,000 in inflated contracts and kickbacks, 3 hidden bank accounts, shell companies, and a conspiracy involving family members. Total misappropriated funds, Sandra announced to the packed room, exceed $152,000 over 3 years. The gasps and angry murmurs filled the room like a swarm of furious bees. But the moment everyone had been waiting for came when Jennifer Walsh announced the criminal charges that would be filed the next morning. Felony embezzlement, racketeering under Arizona RICO statutes, wire fraud, money laundering, and witness tampering. Federal prosecutors had joined the case due to interstate banking violations. The potential sentence, Jennifer said with professional satisfaction, ranges from 15 to 25 years in federal prison. That's when Brenda finally snapped. She leaped to her feet, her carefully constructed composure shattering like expensive crystal hitting concrete. This is all lies, malicious, vindictive lies from a bitter man who can't accept female leadership. The room erupted. 400 voices started shouting simultaneously. Brenda kept screaming about false accusations and community betrayal, while her attorney frantically tried to pull her back into her seat. But the most devastating moment came when Mrs. Rodriguez stood up. Our sweet 72-year-old grandmother, who'd been terrorized into eating ramen noodles to pay bogus fines, walked slowly to the front of the room. The crowd fell silent again, recognizing that this tiny woman was about to deliver the killing blow. "Brenda," she said, her voice carrying the authority of 7 decades of dignity, "yesterday you offered me $500 to lie about Marcus, to say he made me feel unsafe. $500 to betray the man who gave me back my self-respect." The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the air conditioning humming. "You stole our money. You terrorized our families. You tried to destroy anyone who questioned you. But offering to pay an old woman to lie for you? That's when you stopped being just a thief and became something truly evil." The room exploded in applause that lasted 3 full minutes. People were standing, cheering, some crying. Brenda's face went through every emotion humanly possible before settling on pure, helpless rage. That's when Arizona Attorney General Rebecca Martinez stepped forward. I hadn't even noticed her arrive, but there she was, flanked by 2 federal agents and looking like justice personified. "Brenda Kowalski, you're under arrest for felony embezzlement, racketeering, wire fraud, and witness tampering. The handcuffs clicking shut in that silent room sounded like the closing of a book. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and Brenda's empire of petty tyranny officially came to an end. As they led her away, she made one final attempt at defiance. "You'll regret this, all of you. You have no idea what you've done." But we did know exactly what we'd done. We'd chosen justice over fear, community over corruption, and truth over tyranny. The sound of the community center doors closing behind the federal agents was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. The sound of children laughing on a playground built with stolen money is sweeter than you might think. I'm sitting on my back patio, the same patio where my unauthorized wind chimes once constituted a neighborhood crisis, watching kids enjoy equipment that exists because Brenda Kowalski thought she could rob 847 families without consequences. The irony is so perfect it feels like cosmic justice. Brenda pled guilty to all charges in February, accepting an 18-year federal sentence rather than risk 25 at trial. Her attorney called it pragmatic, but I think inevitable was more accurate. When you're caught red-handed running a 3-shell company embezzlement operation, plea bargaining becomes less about innocence and more about minimizing the damage to whatever dignity you have left. The asset recovery blew everyone's expectations out of the water. Between seized bank accounts, the forced sale of Brenda's McMansion, liquidation of her insurance business, and Randy's towing collapsing under conspiracy charges, we recovered $265,000. That's $113,000 more than she actually stole, thanks to Arizona's RICO provisions that let us claim assets from the entire criminal enterprise. Our community transformation reads like a fairy tale with spreadsheets. We built that playground with recovered funds, hired a legitimate landscape company through actual competitive bidding, and established a reserve fund that belongs to homeowners instead of imaginary consulting companies. Monthly dues dropped from $150 to $95, and our quarterly financial reports are so transparent they could probably be seen from orbit. The ripple effects have been even more satisfying than Brenda's mugshot going viral. My story triggered 23 other HOA investigations across Arizona, uncovering corruption from Scottsdale country clubs to Tucson retirement communities. The state legislature passed the Saguaro Springs Act, requiring annual independent audits for HOAs over 100 units and mandatory fiduciary training for board members. I was elected HOA vice president on a platform of never again, developing governance templates that communities statewide have adopted. Speaking at HOA reform conferences has become my unexpected side career. Apparently, evolving from Wi-Fi warrior to suburban justice crusader makes for compelling keynote material. Personal healing has been equally rewarding. My relationship with my ex-wife improved dramatically when she realized I wasn't just starting neighborhood drama, but actually exposing systematic criminal activity. We co-parent more effectively now, united by mutual respect rather than lingering divorce resentment. Mrs. Rodriguez has become my adopted grandmother, appearing every Sunday with homemade tamales and updates from her thriving garden, which now grows freely without fear of arbitrary violation notices. Her granddaughter received our community's first annual scholarship, funded by recovered embezzlement money. She's studying criminal justice at ASU with plans to become a federal prosecutor. The circle of justice continues expanding, but my favorite development has been launching Chen Community Solutions, a consulting business helping HOA governance reform and embezzlement recovery. Annual revenue now exceeds my engineering salary, and we've recovered over $2 million for communities across 12 states. Apparently, there's serious money in fighting suburban corruption. The neighborhood itself has become a national model for transparent governance. Property values jumped 8% this year due to improved management and overwhelmingly positive media coverage. We've been featured in documentaries about financial crime and cited in congressional testimony about HOA reform. Not bad for a community that started with one sarcastic Wi-Fi name. Speaking of which, my current network name reads Community Strong 2024. Neighbors adopted similar positive themes reflecting our transformed reality. The local coffee shop created a signature drink called the HOA Hero, because taking down neighborhood dictators apparently qualifies you for caffeinated immortality. We're planning a summer Saguaro Springs Freedom Festival, funded entirely by recovered theft money. The celebration will feature speakers on homeowner rights and community organizing. We're expecting visitors from across the Southwest. Our story has achieved legendary status in HOA reform circles. The most important lesson from this entire journey is that ordinary people can defeat extraordinary corruption when they refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. Small communities can topple powerful criminals. Legal systems work when citizens demand accountability. And sometimes the smallest acts of digital rebellion trigger the biggest social changes. Every evening, I listen to my wind chimes singing in the desert breeze, legally and proudly displayed naturally. They sound exactly like freedom. So here's my challenge. What will your Wi-Fi name say tomorrow? Drop your wildest network ideas in the comments below. And if you're battling HOA harassment or community corruption, share your story. Let's expose these suburban tyrants together. Hit subscribe for more justice stories. Because somewhere right now, another Brenda is measuring grass with rulers, and another Marcus is about to change their Wi-Fi name. The revolution is just getting started.